One thing that Hungarians are very excited about is their language. If you ask any Hungarian, it's the hardest language in the world, and they're very proud about that. Hungarian is a very old language. It hasn't really been changed much through time. A lot of the languages that were in the past similar to Hungarian have kind of died out. And the only language that experts say is similar to Hungarian is Finnish, but it's still very different. Hungarian is tough. Very difficult. It's difficult for a number of reasons. The grammar is very complicated, and depending on how you say things, you can say something completely different than what you wanted to say. There's not a set word order, so it's very flexible with a word order where you can put the direct object before the noun, you can put it after the noun, you can put adjectives wherever, just depending on what you want to say. To emphasize something, you put it in the beginning of the sentence, so most of the important things are in the beginning part, and all the other details are like at the end. It's pretty different than English, so to be able to kind of think in Hungarian takes a really, really long time, or at least it did for me. I didn't pick that up right away. So in Hungarian, it's called an agglutinated language, which means everything is tacked on to words. So you'll start with a word, you'll have something that maybe comes in front of the word that hits or that attaches to that, and then you'll have all the prepositions and stuff, all the conjugations after it. So you can start out with a word like this long and then end up with a word like this long. And so what they taught us is to kind of read a word from backwards to forwards. So that was also really different. You see a word that you think is completely unfamiliar, but then you sort of like break it up and kind of understand it. Sometimes we can have a full sentence in English, but in Hungarian, it's just one word. So to my siblings, in English, that would be one word. In Hungarian, it'd be testvéreimnek. Testvér is sibling. Testvéreim. That aim means they're mine, like my siblings, and then nek at the end means to them. That's a really simple example of that, but so many different possibilities and ways that you can say things as well. Don't beat yourself up if you're having a rough time. Everyone will have a rough time learning Hungarian. Also, speaking is probably the most useful tool. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You will make them. But the Hungarians are very patient. Again, they know that their language is the hardest in the world. So they're very willing to help you, to correct you, but to do it in a loving manner and to let you speak. One of the hard things in Hungarian, or at least for me, was when you're speaking to older people or people of authority, you use different conjugations or conjugate in a different way than you would with other people. Kind of a formalization. And it's really difficult to kind of switch your brain to formalizing someone rather than informalizing someone. But if you go up to anyone and you're formalizing them, they're formalizing you, and you ask, hey, I'm learning this language, can I just use these other conjugations? Can I informalize you? They'll be like, oh yeah, for sure, you can talk to me as if we were friends. And so that was really cool to see. I think Hungarian is the best language.
So with the language, there's a couple things I wish I would have practiced a little more in the MTC that I didn't practice as much. And that is the Ö and the Ü sounds. So, for example, a really good word is shoelace. Shoelace and camera. Okay, I'm going to give you two examples. Shoelace is cipőfűző. I still can't even say it right to this day, I think. And then camera is fényképezőgép. So if you can say your Ö and your Ü right, then you'll get the language down pretty quickly at the beginning. You'll get a pretty good head start. Because a lot of missionaries go in there and they say Ü, or like cipőfűző. You don't want to say that, because Hungarians can definitely tell the difference in the intonation when you say Ü and Ü. It's crazy. I mean, you're listening to this right now, you probably can't tell the difference, but they can tell the difference, and they're really picky about it. And they will correct you in the language. They're really nice about that as well. They'll really help you with the language. In a lot of countries, You know, they kind of give you a hard time for trying to learn their language, but in Hungary, they really, really admire you. So if you go to Hungary and you get your U and your U down, then the people will be really impressed. So that's something that I wish I would have practiced a little bit more. And another one is zöld. It means green, but I mean, to this day, I feel like I still can't even say it right. It's like zöld, zöld. It just feels weird coming out of an American mouth, you know, like it's just, I don't know, it's strange. So it definitely feels weird. You definitely have to get used to a lot of it. But that comes with just repetition. Read your Book of Mormon in Hungarian all the time. You know, write down every word that you hear. Don't write down words during a program, because that's what I did, and it was super ineffective because, I mean, obviously you're not really paying attention to what's necessarily going on in the program. You're paying attention to too much on the vocab. So just my advice would be to maybe write down words in the program and then look them up later. So don't write down words and look up words in the program, just so you can kind of understand what's going on, because you're not going to get anywhere near the conversation if you're trying to do that word by word. There's no way. So just do it when you get home, and it's a lot more effective that way. And study it throughout the day. I made a goal to do 10 words every single day for the rest of my mission, and that's what I tried, and I stuck to it. And if you don't get to memorizing 10 words every day, if you have that goal, at least you get to memorize 6 or 7, and it all adds up. So I mean, you really will get a huge head start on the language if you do that. Don't be afraid to mess up. Just go in there and speak. You may sound like a dummy, you think, but I mean, even if you do, just keep on talking. That's the only way, especially with the Hungarian language, that you can learn the language. A lot of missionaries give up early in their mission before even halfway, and they see themselves coming up on at the end of their mission, and they can't even really speak the language because they don't put that repetition in, they don't put that practice in. So, and use the words that you learn every day. Don't just memorize them and then never use them. Really use them in your everyday speech. And again, just don't be afraid to mess up. Read the Blue Book. You guys will know what the Blue Book is, or the grammar book. Read it all the time. Don't just read it once. Keep on reading it over and over again, and that'll really help you a lot too. For me, I honestly thought, when I got to the country, I honestly thought I was never going to be able to really get the language down like some of the elders. I mean, I just thought they were language gurus because of how well they were speaking the language when I first got to the country. It was nuts to me. I was like, wow, how are they speaking that? Like, how do they say that word? But it just comes with time. If you don't think it'll come, it will come if you practice. If you put that repetition in, it will. And I mean, you have the Lord on your side. You have the gift of tongues. Pray for that every single day of your mission. That'll really help you. Always pray in Hungarian. That always helped me as well. And yeah, so just speak it all you can. Just give it your best, and it'll come.
So Hungarian is a difficult language. It is hard to learn, especially for English speakers, but it is so beautiful. The first time I heard it in the MTC was when we had just walked into the classroom, and our teacher just started speaking Hungarian to us immediately, and I was just like, whoa. It was like he tried to be nice and like slow down, tried to teach us how to introduce ourselves and stuff like that, but he was just speaking Hungarian to us. And then later on in the day, there was a group of missionaries that was also going to Hungary that was just ahead of us by about 6 weeks. And so we would usually pray together before going to lunch or before going back to our apartments at night. So our first experience with having them come pray with us, one of the sisters, she obviously prayed in Hungarian, and it just sounded so fluttery. It was just all these K's and T's and just all this stuff all over the place. And I thought it was just so beautiful. And so obviously it sounded different once I got to the country, because we were all English speakers trying to speak Hungarian. But then you get there and the native speakers, it's just so beautiful. So beautiful. Their poetry is so beautiful when you know the language and you can actually break down what they're saying in their poetry. It's just so... It's just lovely. I don't know how to describe it, because the way that they conjugate their words, the way that they're able to express themselves, it makes it so much easier for them to put these thoughts down, like just to mesh it together. It's hard to explain. So like I've said a few times, yes, they do conjugate things. They don't have the gender roles. They don't have the like boy and girl verbs or nouns and stuff like that. And if they're talking about a he or a she, it's the same word. It's just like that person, that individual. So sometimes you have to make sure you're talking about the right person because you don't have that gender thrown in there unless they say their name or say their relation, like, oh, my daughter or something. But yeah, there's conjugations for possession, like how you possess things. I don't know. It's all over the place. It's hard. I'm still learning it. I'm still mastering it. Even after speaking it for 19 months, it's like I'm still working on it. But I don't know. I guess any advice that I would give to people that are learning the language and that end up going to Hungary is to not be afraid to ask questions. I got to a point where I did feel a bit down on myself in the MTC because my companion that was the one that was going to Hungary with me, she was doing so well with the language. She does have Hungarian roots in her, and so her father is Hungarian, but he didn't really speak Hungarian with her in the home. But I just feel like first she was just smart, plus I just feel like it was in her blood. She was just so good at learning the language, and so I felt kind of bad that I wasn't on the same page as her sometimes, and unfortunately it kind of caused me to not want to try sometimes around her because I was just like, oh, she speaks so well, like I'll let her do it, like when we did our practice teaching. And I also would feel sometimes embarrassed to ask questions, be like, oh, well, what did that word mean? But that was a bad habit to get in. When I got to the country and would try speaking with people, sometimes I just didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to look dumb, or I didn't want to ruin the flow of conversation if two people were talking and then I couldn't understand, so I would just let them talk and pretend I understood and just nod my head and smile, But then that got me into trouble once, and I learned my lesson because I was in church and it was my first day in a new city. It was in Szeged. Well, I'd only been it's kind of complicated. I'll give a little history of my mission. So I got to Budapest, I was assigned my trainer, and then we went to Miskolc, my first area, but then my trainer got sick, and so I was only with her for a couple of weeks. And finally we established a plan with the mission president that we would go to Budapest, go to the mission home in Buda, and she was going to take some time there to recover. And so then I was assigned to the Buda sisters to serve with them. And I was with them for a week. And then the mission president reassigned me to go down to Szeged, to another city, to serve with 2 other sisters. And so I was put again with the sister that I had gone to Hungary with, because she was still doing her training. And then I was with her trainer. And so the 3 of us served together in Szeged it was about 3 weeks that I was there with them. So my first transfer I spent in 3 different cities. And so by the time I got to Szeged, I had been in the country for 3 weeks. About 3 to 4 weeks. So I was still learning. And anyway, so my first Sunday there, I got to Sunday school. Sacrament meeting was awesome. And then we got to Sunday school, and there was this man there, and I think he was an investigator. And he kind of started talking with me, and I was trying to talk to him, and he was asking how long I had been in the country and where I was from and how I liked being there. And so when he asked where I was from, I told him, oh, I'm from Utah. And he just started going off about the Indians, Indianok. So I understood that. I was like, oh, Indians, Indianok. Okay, that's a similar word. I can do this, That was close. So I felt like I was following the conversation pretty well, and he was just using his hands a lot, and talking about the Indians. And I got lost. I admit, I was like, okay, I don't know what we're talking about anymore, but I assumed Indians. And he started doing something like this on his forehead with his hands, just saying something. And in my mind, I'm thinking, headbands. He's talking about the headbands, how the Indians had such nice headdress, And so I just tell him oh, az szép, az nagyon szép. I tell him that's very beautiful. They have beautiful things, Come to find out, my trainer tells me no, he's talking about scalping, how the Indians would scalp, And I was like, oh, I felt so dumb. I felt so bad because I'm telling him that's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And he's like, scalping, it's like, that's the most not beautiful thing. I don't know. And all the young adults that were in the room, they just started laughing, and everybody they thought it was hilarious. And I laughed too. I was like, okay, that was dumb. But then I just came to find, you can only go so far assuming that you know what someone's talking about, but it is so much better to just ask. To just be like, what is that? What does that word mean? And plus, you'll learn the language a lot faster if you're not afraid to ask questions. And so it took some time for me to get over that, to feel more comfortable asking and stopping conversations, that way I could catch up. And now looking back, it's like after I was able to make that change, to change my mindset with it, then I just started to do so much better with the language. I wasn't afraid anymore. And sometimes I would still fall in those situations where I would just pretend I understood, and I'd be like, yeah, totally, but didn't understand. So my advice would be, don't do that. Just ask questions. You'll learn a lot faster. You'll avoid embarrassing situations most of the time. but yeah, it's hard, but it's beautiful. It's fun to speak. So.